Okay, good morning. Welcome to our Erev Shabbat Parashat class. Parashat Terumah, the poles that just wouldn't move. Let's talk about them. First, we'll say that the class today is in our upcoming classes, Le'alun Ishmael Moshe ben Bahia, our good friend forever, Mr. Mokish, who sat on this table for many decades together with us, off the table, on the table, around the table. We love him, we miss him. Parashat Terumah, of course, is Hashem's introduction and instructions to Moshe Rabbeinu alone about the vessels and the curtains and the structure of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle to be built and to be instructed in later Parashiyot and after Moshe's 40-day meeting with Hashem on Har Sinai. And here we have the first description of what Hashem is envisioning to Moshe Rabbeinu, all the details, all the intricacies, all the preciseness, every thread, every stone, every piece of wood and metal of every vessel in the Mishkan. However, there are a handful of vessels which the Torah not only talks about the vessels themselves, but the fact that we need an accessory with which to hold the vessel. These vessels all had taba'ot, which means they had rings on their corners. And in those taba'ot, it's insertable. They're made that way so that you can be able to insert something with which you can use when we needed to move and travel in the midbar to actually lift the vessels, which were quite heavy. You had 4 people lift them by inserting a few poles in them. And by that way, having a means of travel through the desert with for whatever the reason that it was necessary to disassemble the Mishkan, to go on the move with the vessels of the Mishkan. So for the first one that we're introduced is the Aron. And the Aron, the Torah tells us that you're going to have to make, by the way, we're in Perek Chapter 25, Pasuk Yud Gimel, verse 13. You're to make these poles that have the acacia wood. They're covered with gold, so similar material makeup as were the vessels. Next Pasuk, and you shall place these poles into the rings in order to use them to carry the Aron. Aron's not the only vessel. The next vessel discussed is the shulchan, the table that hold the lechem hapanim, the loaves of bread. That also, the Torah instructs us that you're going to have badim, asita badim, similar instructions. And with those poles, you'll carry the shulchan. Later on in our parasha, what we call Mizbeach HaGadol, the large Mizbeach Nechoshet that was used to place all the korbanot on top of them, it too had rings in which you insert the poles. And also later, next week's parasha, at the end of Parashat Tisaveh, the Mizbach HaZahav, the smaller altar of gold that was inside the Mishkan, on which we put the incense. The Ketoret also had rings, which we were told to insert the poles. Now, on the table, on the shulchan, and on the smaller mizbeach, on the table and on the Aron, it actually says vehebeta. You should place them. Actually, let me correct that. The Aron and the Mizbah HaNechoshet, and the larger Mizbeach, it says that you shall put them in as an instruction. You shall place them in. On the shulchan, the table, and Mizbah HaZahav, the smaller altar, you put the ketoret, it doesn't instruct you actually, behebeta, put them in. We understand that that's why we're told to make them, is in order to use them. Interesting note. However, to go back to the Aron, the ark, which houses, of course, the luchot, who's going to house the tablets of the Torah, the luchot, there's an extra instruction. And only of this vessel do we find this instruction. So we continue to Pasuk Ted Vav, verse 15, the next one. Hashem instructs Moshe Rabbeinu, B'tabeot ha'aron yihiyu habadim lo yasuru mimenu. In the rings of the ark shall be these poles, lo yasuru mimenu. They should not be removed from them. And the Gemara explains that lo yasuru mimenu, look, hamasir mimenu lokeh. This is a mizvah lo ta'aseh, and he who takes the poles out of the rings is liable to lashes, malkut. And in fact, if you look up the Rambam Sefer HaMizvot, listed as one of the 365 negative commandments, mizvot lo ta'aseh, is not removing the poles from the Aron. You are from the rings in the Aron. You are violating a negative commandment should you remove those poles. Sefer HaChanuch as well counts this as a mizvah lo ta'aseh, and he explains that this is even one lidorot for generations, because eventually we had, of course, the Beit HaMikdash when we got to Israel, which stood for hundreds of years, and B'ezrat Hashem, and the second Beit HaMikdash, there wasn't the Aron, second Beit HaMikdash, and we'll have a future one. And once again, this mizvah will be in play. And the question obviously is, I got it. We need the rings. We need the poles to carry the Aron. I understand why we should even be commanded to put them in, although only with the Aron and only with the larger Mizbeach, it says that you shall bring them in, the Hebetah. Fine, but they have to be there. They serve a purpose. And it's a commandment that we're fulfilling by crafting those poles, because the instructions of the Mishkan, the functioning of the Mishkan. But why can't they ever leave? Why do they have to be there? Are they not an accessory? Are they not like a lehavdil, a hand truck, something that's needed to transport, to push, to move? What is the violation of removing poles from rings? What is the big deal? Who cares? You're liable for lashes and violating one of the lo ta'aseh, negative commandments of the Torah, should you remove the poles. So obviously, there's depth behind this. There are concepts, there are reasons. And let's just present a few of them this morning, keeping in mind that it's only commanded with the Aron, which houses, of course, the Luchot, the tablets of the Torah, but also the larger Mizbeach, does it say to bring them in, vehebetah. So I'll present three different reasons that come from three different angles. One's a practical reason, one is a symbolic and a historic one, and the other, final, will be a major conceptual reason. So the practical one, presented to us by Sefer HaChanuch, is simply that, listen, the Aron, which of course was heavy, gold and solid wood inside, very heavy, housing what is the most precious asset, you could say, in the history of Judaism, physical asset, the tablets of the Torah, handcrafted by God himself, given to Moshe Rabbeinu, passed on to Israel as a gift from heaven, literally. Okay, and because of that, obviously, we're very worried about this Aron, the handling of it, the care of it. Says the Sefer HaChanuch very simply, that were we not commanded to leave these poles inside the rings, and by the way, the structure of the poles were that, and this is learned from the Pesukim, that they were wider on the ends and more narrow in the middle, so that it's possible to remove them, because there else there'd be no such violation if you couldn't remove them, no potential violation. It's possible, but with difficulty. So they sat comfortably in the narrow part, which fit nicely inside the pole, but the thicker part, you would have a little bit of a harder time to pull them out. And that's the way they were structured. But in any case, says the Sefer HaChanuch, were we not be commanded to leave those poles in the rings, so when it came time to transport, what you might do, we may look around, find the original poles, another set of poles, no big deal. It's for practical purposes. Any way you get it done. The bottom line is we're using something nice and sturdy to transport the Aron. But lest we pick up something that perhaps is not worthy, is not sturdy enough, is not strong enough to handle something of such weight, and has v'shalom, should the carriers, the bearers of the Aron break it or have it slip, and or do the poles break and not be able to sustain under the weight of the Aron, and that Aron, has v'shalom, takes a little slip and a fall, it's a disaster. And therefore, if we keep them permanent, if we instruct that those poles must be permanently in those rings, and these are the poles that are crafted with a certain sturdiness and thickness to be able to handle the Aron, we'll never have that problem. So we keep them in there for the more seldom occasions when we did travel, to make sure that everything's right when we do travel. Very practical reason. Now, both the Emek Davar and Rabbi Hirsch, Aleichem HaShalom, speak of a wonderful symbolism of the fact that the Torah, as we said, makes us keep the poles in the Aron at all times, and also instructs us to place them in both the Aron and in the rings of the larger Mizbeach. And of course, we know that the Aron is holding our Torah, Chidusha. And of course, the Mizbeach stands for service of God. Service of God, Abudah, which of course is offering sacrifices, but a replacement for it, and in lieu of it, and an equal to it, is prayer, a service of God. And the Emek Davar breaches the topic by saying that the idea of carrying Nisaim, that we will be carrying all the time in every generation, no matter where we are, even in Galut, even after we're in exile, from country to country and century to century, we'll always be carrying the obligation and the connection and the privilege of Torah and Avodah, of Torah and Tefillah. That will never end. Exile, enemies, oppression, nothing will ever take that away from us. We'll be the bearers of the Aron and the Mizbeach at all times. And therefore the Torah says, put those poles inside of them. And no matter what, you'll always be carrying them. Rabbi Hirsch takes it to another level and explains that we have to make it clear from the beginning. The mission, the Torah itself, the mission of Torah, the objective of Torah, us bearing and representing the Torah to the rest of the world, that can never be confined. It will never be bound. It will never be tied down. It's never tied and dependent upon a place. It is not stagnant, and nothing limits the application of the Torah, whether we have a sanctuary, a Beit HaMikdash, or not. We have to make this clear to begin with, by mandating that these poles remain in this Aron, that we're always carrying the Aron. It's in a constant state of being carried. And it can't be confined. Its existence is not confined to time or place. And in fact, this is made very clear to us in Kriyat Shema every single day that we say, if you heed my call and listen to my ordinances, my mitzvot, you observe my Torah, all the bounties and all the rewards, physically speaking, in Eretz Yisrael. And if not, and I warn you, sartem va'abatem, you slip and fall. Hashem angers, and before you know it, and I really eject you from the land, and we're expelled into exile. And right after that, the very same command from the paragraph of Shema Yisrael and Ve'ahavta, which is learn Torah, teach Torah, at home, in the road, etc. Is repeated once again. When? After we're kicked off the land. Teach your children, learn Torah, to teach us that Torah is not what's called a mizvat ha'aris. It's not dependent upon the land. It's not dependent upon a time or a place. It's mizvat haguf. It's an individual mitzvah. It travels with us. It never leaves us, no matter how we're thrust out of the normal way of existence that Am Yisrael was meant to exist. And by the way, how confused was Am Yisrael after hundreds of years off their land for the first time? Are we still Jewish? Are we still observant? Can we still practice? Are we still committed to Hashem? What can we do anymore? We're off our land. We're used to this living, this life. It's not the way it's meant to be. And we have to be told, life goes on, Judaism goes on, because Torah continues. You'll be holding them at all times. It is transported with you wherever you go. That message has to be crystal clear from the start. Don't you dare take those poles out. Because don't you think for a moment that this Aron is dependent on this Mishkan. Because it's not. You're carrying them forever. That's the historic existence of Am Yisrael. That's our lifeblood. That's our identity. And therefore the symbol is keep the poles inside. Finally, I want to present a conceptual idea, and that is a topic that is mentioned and alluded to by the Dad Zekanim Ba'alei Tosafot, a commentary that can be found in your standard Mikra Gitulot. And that is as follows. He says that the Kedusha, the sanctity, the level of sanctity of the Aron has it. And I'll give you a little background to this. The Aron is a separate discussion in and of itself. It's physical, but it's metaphysical at the same time. The Aron and the Cherubim on top of the Aron, the cherubs with the faces, the children, or the angelic-like faces, aligns exactly to the greatest and most deep prophecy of all time, the Kisei HaKavod, the throne of Hashem, so to speak. And there you had also, with these hayot, these type of higher level angels and the four faces, cherubim as well. It aligns in a metaphysical world exactly with the physical world. And we're told, therefore, that just like we had a Merkabah, we had a chariot that held the Kisei HaKavod, so too the Aron and the cherubs, the cherubim on top of its cover also hold the Kisei HaKavod, so to speak, the throne of God. So the actual manifestation of the existence of God is, so to speak, concentrated in the Kodesh Kodashim and on that Aron. Must be understood. And therefore, it blows our mind. It's inconceivable of the actual function, the existence of that tiny room and the actual function of an existence of this tiny box called the Aron. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want us to get anywhere near having the opportunity to touch this Aron, to hold, to handle this Aron. We lift it, staying afar, keeping apart, and we put it back down as we leave. We're nowhere near our hands, don't even encroach the area of the Aron, and we back off. Because there's some things in our relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, despite our closeness to him, despite him being our father, but there is a certain distance we have to keep. You get too close to the fire, you get burnt. And that is true in an intellectual way. You got to watch where you go up here. You have to know not to cross lines. Crossing lines is dangerous. Depends who you are, what your background is, how educated you are, and your level of comprehension. And that's true physically also. There's a yellow line at the end of the subway. Don't pass it because you stick your head out, you know what's going to happen. There's also an orange line before that. Don't even come a few feet close to the ledge of the platform of the subway. Please don't come close. You got to draw lines. There's a certain place that you can't be. That's why you don't step into Kodesh Kodashim. Only Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur. Certain places we're not meant to enter, and there's certain things we're not meant to touch. We can't touch it. We don't understand it. We can't relate to it. It's ours. It represents us. We embrace it. We love it. And we feel the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but touch no. There's a certain buffer and distance we have to keep between us and the manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and God on this earth. And therefore, it's not just inserting poles. It's making sure that those poles are always there and never taking any chance, even a sliver of doubt, that one could possibly come so close and in such a dangerous way to contacting that holy Aron that is on one hand in this world, and the other hand not in this world. And therefore, Kadosh Baruch Hu, for love of Am Yisrael, for practical reasons, for great historical reasons that tell us about our future existence and upholding our Torah in every time and place, and also for the powerful conceptual idea of keeping a distance between us and Hashem and knowing our boundaries. Hashem says, those poles, craft them, insert them, but don't you dare move them. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.